The moment she walked into that dining room with a baby on her hip, every head turned, but not to help. They turned to judge, to whisper, to watch her fall apart. What none of them expected was the stranger at table 17 who would stand up and say 5 words that changed everything. This is a story about dignity, second chances, and the courage to build love from broken pieces. The Sterling Oak Steakhouse hummed with the kind of quiet wealth that made Marcus Thornton uncomfortable. Crystal glasses catching candlelight, leather booths the color of old money, servers moving like shadows between tables, where conversations never rose above a murmur. He didn't belong here, not anymore. Marcus sat alone at table 17, trying not to check his watch for the fourth time in 10 minutes. His date was already 25 minutes late. The reservation had been made by his sister-in-law, Rosalind, who had been on a mission to get him back out there ever since he mentioned at a family barbecue that maybe his daughter Juniper needed more than just a grieving father who still kept her mother's coffee mug on the kitchen counter. That confession had apparently been all Rosalind needed. Within a week, she had set up this blind date with a lovely young woman from the hospital auxiliary. Someone Rosa swore was perfect for someone in his situation. Marcus hated that phrase, his situation, as if being a widower was a condition that could be treated with the right prescription of forced social interaction and well-meaning setups. He had almost canceled 3 times. The only reason he was sitting here now, tie feeling like a noose around his neck, was the memory of 7-year-old Juniper watching him get ready that evening. She had sat on his bed with those serious dark eyes, so much like her mother's, and said something that broke his heart wide open. "You look handsome, Daddy. I hope she makes you smile again." Real smiles, not the tired ones. The weight of that simple hope had gotten him into his truck and across town to this restaurant where he felt completely out of place. His work boots, hastily swapped for dress shoes, still had traces of construction dust on the soles. His tie was a clip-on because he had never learned to tie a real one. Not since he was 12 and his father tried to teach him for his uncle's wedding. Around him, Austin's elite performed their evening rituals. To his left, a couple in their 60s discussed their lake house renovation. To his right, 3 businessmen laughed over scotch that probably cost more than Marcus's truck payment. Everyone looked like they had been born knowing which fork to use, which wine to order, how to exist in spaces where judgment wore expensive cologne. Marcus was reaching for his phone to text Rosalind an excuse when the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first, a pause in conversations, heads turning toward the kitchen entrance, the kind of collective attention that precedes either celebrity or catastrophe. He looked up. A young woman had emerged from the kitchen, and everything about her screamed wrong place, wrong time. She was maybe mid-20s, dressed in the black pants and white shirt of the serving staff. But her uniform was disheveled, shirt partially untucked, hair escaping from what had probably been a neat ponytail that morning. That wasn't what had stopped conversations. On her hip, she carried a toddler, maybe 18 months old, wearing a blue dinosaur shirt and tiny sneakers. The child was crying, that particular pitch of infant distress that seems designed by evolution to pierce through any ambient noise. The woman's face was flushed, her eyes red-rimmed. Even from across the dining room, Marcus could see her hands shaking. Following close behind her was a man in his 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. The restaurant manager, Marcus guessed, from the way he carried himself. That particular blend of authority and carefully maintained composure. But that composure was cracking. "Vivian, this is completely unacceptable." The manager's voice carried across the suddenly quiet dining room. He was trying to keep his tone professional, but fury bled through every syllable. "We have discussed this multiple times. A premier establishment is not a daycare facility, not a charity." The young woman shifted the crying child, trying to soothe him while keeping her voice steady. Her name tag read, Vivian. Mr. Whitmore, please. My babysitter's daughter has the flu. I couldn't find anyone else. I thought if I could just keep him quiet in the break room. You thought you could bring an infant to one of Austin's premier dining establishments during our busiest service? Gerard Whitmore's face was reddening. Every eye in the restaurant was locked on them now. Marcus saw a woman at a nearby table whisper something to her companion with visible disgust. A businessman shook his head and returned to his steak, dismissing the scene as beneath his attention. Vivian's arms tightened around her child. I know it's not ideal, but I didn't have a choice. I can't afford to miss a shift. Rent is due in 4 days. I have $73 in my bank account. Please, Mr. Whitmore, I need this job. What you need is to learn that your personal failures are not our problem. Gerard's voice had gone cold now, cold enough to frost glass. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your things. The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian actually swayed, and for a moment Marcus thought she might collapse. The baby, sensing something terrible in his mother's stillness, wailed louder. No, please, I have rent due. I have... Security will escort you out. Gerard was already turning away. The duty discharge. The unpleasantness dealt with. And that was when something in Marcus Thornton broke open. He had been watching this scene unfold with growing horror. His own discomfort at being in this restaurant had transformed into something hotter, sharper. He had seen the looks on the faces around him, the disgust, the judgment, the way people shifted in their seats as if poverty might be contagious. He had seen the way they looked at this young woman like she was a problem to be removed, not a person in crisis. And suddenly he was back in a different place 3 years ago. He was standing in a hospital corridor being told that his wife, Elaine, had not survived the accident. He was back in his kitchen at 2 in the morning, trying to figure out how to tell a 4-year-old that mommy was not coming home. He was back in every moment when the world had felt impossible, when he had been drowning and no one had thrown him a rope because they were too busy maintaining the polite fiction that struggle was a personal failing. Something ancient and fierce rose in his chest. Something that had been buried since Elaine died, smothered under responsibility and grief and the sheer exhausting weight of surviving. Marcus stood up. The movement drew attention. Heads swiveled toward him like sunflowers tracking light. The businessman at the table beside him paused mid-sentence. The couple discussing their lake house went silent. Gerard Whitmore had almost reached the kitchen door. Vivian stood frozen in the middle of the dining room, clutching her crying child, looking like she had been caught in a spotlight she had never asked for. Marcus's chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound in the crystalline silence. "Excuse me," his voice carried across the room with the same authority he used on construction sites when heavy equipment was moving and lives depended on clear communication. "I think you're firing my date." Every head in the restaurant swiveled toward him. Gerard froze mid-step. And Vivian, this young woman he had never met, whose name he had just learned in the worst possible context, turned to look at him with an expression of pure confusion. Marcus started walking. Each step felt significant, like he was crossing more than just a dining room floor. He could feel phones being subtly shifted into recording position. He did not care. Gerard had turned back, his professional mask slipping to show irritation beneath. "I'm sorry, sir, but this doesn't concern. Her name is Vivian Caldwell. We had a reservation for 7:30. I'm Marcus Thornton." He reached Vivian's side. Up close, he could see she was even younger than he had thought. Probably not yet 25. Her name tag was slightly crooked. There was a stain on her collar that looked like baby food. The child in her arms had stopped crying, distracted by this new presence, regarding Marcus with solemn curiosity. "Mr. Thornton," Gerard said through gritted teeth, "I appreciate your gesture, but Vivian is an employee here. This is a personnel matter." "Was an employee. You fired her, which means she's free to leave with me. Marcus pulled out his wallet. How much for the disruption? For the 30 seconds of crying that apparently destroyed everyone's evening? I'll cover it, all of it. Gerard's face went from red to purple. This isn't about money? Really? Because it seems like it's about exactly that. Marcus pulled out $200 in cash and placed it on the nearest table. That should cover whatever compensation you think is fair. My date and I are going somewhere that doesn't treat single mothers like criminals for having the audacity to be human. He turned to Vivian, offering his hand. There's a diner on 6th Street. They don't care if babies cry, and the burgers are better anyway. For a moment, Vivian just stared at him. Her eyes, dark brown and exhausted, searched his face like she was trying to find the trick. The catch. The inevitable moment when this gesture would transform into something else. Marcus knew that look. He had worn it himself often enough in the year after Elaine died, when people offered help that came with invisible price tags. I don't understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do this? We don't even know each other. No, but I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough, and someone helped me when I needed it. Maybe it's time I paid that forward. The baby made a small sound, reaching toward Marcus with one chubby hand. Without thinking, Marcus let the child grab his finger. The grip was surprisingly strong. Hey there, buddy. Tough night, huh? Something in Vivian's face cracked. That careful wall she'd been holding against the world. The armor you build when you are tired of apologizing for existing. Okay, she breathed the word like a prayer. Okay, yes, please, let's go. Marcus turned back to Gerard, who looked like he was trying to decide whether to call security or just let this circus leave his restaurant. We'll be going now. Thanks for the hospitality. He offered his arm to Vivian. She stared at it for a moment, this old-fashioned gesture in the middle of a very modern humiliation, then shifted her son to one hip and threaded her free hand through Marcus's elbow. Together, they walked toward the exit. The dining room remained silent except for the quiet soundtrack playing over the speakers. Something classical and tasteful that had probably been selected specifically to not intrude on the consciousness of people paying $40 for a steak. But Vivian held her head high. Her hand on his arm was trembling, but her spine was straight, her shoulders back. She had been beaten down tonight, humiliated, fired. But she was not broken. Marcus respected the hell out of that. They reached the door. The hostess held it open without a word. The November air hit them like a shock, cool and clean after the recycled atmosphere of the restaurant. The door swung shut behind them, and then they were on the sidewalk, Austin's lights spreading out around them. Vivian took 2 steps away from Marcus, still holding her son, and just broke. Oh, God. She gasped the words between sobs. Oh, God. I just lost my job. How am I going to? Rent is due in 4 days. I have $73 and I just... The baby, sensing his mother's distress, started crying again. Vivian bounced him automatically, but her own tears were falling freely now. I'm so sorry. She turned back to Marcus. I don't even know you. This isn't your problem. I shouldn't... Hey. Marcus moved closer, keeping his movements slow and obvious. You're okay. Or you're going to be okay. I'm not okay. The words burst out of her. I just got fired for being a mother, for not being able to afford a babysitter who doesn't cancel when her own kid gets sick. Marcus waited. He had learned in the dark months after Elaine died that sometimes people needed to fall apart before they could come back together. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was just stand there, be present, not try to fix it. After a long moment, Vivian's sobs quieted to hitching breaths. The baby had calmed too, resting his head on his mother's shoulder. I'm sorry. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You must think I'm a complete disaster. I think you're a mother who's been dealt a rough hand and is doing everything you can to keep your kids safe and fed. She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. Why did you do that? In there? Why would you claim I was your date when you could have just stayed out of it? Didn't seem right, the way they were looking at you, like you'd committed some crime by being human. But you're... She stopped suddenly, something clicking in her expression. Wait, Monica set you up tonight, didn't she? Monica Garcia from the hospital auxiliary? You know Monica? She was supposed to set me up on a blind date tonight with a really great guy, but my babysitter canceled and I forgot and... She stopped again, realization dawning. Oh my God, you're the date. I was supposed to meet you. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that felt almost like fate, though he had stopped believing in fate a long time ago. So technically, I wasn't lying back there. For the first time that night, Vivian laughed. Small and broken, but real. Marcus smiled. Come on, that diner's not going to find itself. And I don't know about you, but I'm starving. They walked together through Austin's evening streets, Vivian carrying her son, Marcus walking beside them. The baby had grabbed a fistful of his mother's shirt and was watching Marcus with big, uncertain eyes. Fate or coincidence? Marcus asked as they approached the neon glow of the Starlight Diner. Vivian looked at him, then at her son, then at the diner door opening to let them in from the cold. I stopped believing in fate a long time ago, but tonight, I'm not so sure anymore. The Starlight Diner was everything the Sterling Oak was not. Neon signs buzzing softly, formica tables with their share of scratches and coffee rings, waitresses who called everyone honey and refilled coffee without being asked. Marcus and Vivian sat across from each other in a corner booth while her son Beckett played with sugar packets, occasionally offering them to his mother with the generosity of someone who believed everything should be shared. They talked. Vivian told him about growing up in the foster care system after her mother struggled with addiction, about the third-grade teacher named Mrs. Bellamy, who was the only person who ever made her feel seen, who inspired her to pursue a teaching degree, about being 3 semesters away from finishing at Austin Community College, about Beckett's father, a man named Damian Vance, who had looked at her 4 months into the pregnancy and said, I didn't sign up for this, before walking out and never looking back. It's just us. She stroked Beckett's hair as he dozed against her shoulder. Me and Beck, we're all we've got. Marcus told her about Elaine, about the phone call from the hospital that had shattered his world, about the months of drowning in grief while trying to keep his daughter Juniper from seeing her father fall apart, about his father-in-law Franklin giving him a loan when he was about to lose the house, and the words that had saved him. There's no nobility in drowning when someone's offering you a rope. Take the help, get back on your feet, and someday help someone else. Someone threw me a rope once, Marcus said. Maybe it's time I threw one to someone else. He wrote her a check for $700 that night, enough for rent and groceries. She refused 3 times before accepting, her pride battling with her desperation until desperation won. I'm paying you back. Every cent. I don't care how long it takes. I know you will. He also offered her a job, administrative work for his construction company, $15 an hour, flexible schedule, and she could bring Beckett. His office was just a converted garage. There was space for a playmat. Vivian stared at him like he had offered her the moon. Why? Why would you do all this? Because I've been where you are, and because my daughter told me tonight that she hopes I'll smile again. Real smiles, not the tired ones. He met her eyes. You're the first person in 3 years who's made me think that might actually be possible. The weeks that followed felt like something Marcus had forgotten existed. like color returning to a world that had been gray for so long he had stopped noticing. Vivian transformed his chaotic office into a functioning system within 3 days. She scheduled jobs, organized materials orders, handled customer calls with a warmth that made clients feel heard. His business had never run more smoothly, but it was more than that. It was shared lunches and stories about their children. It was Beckett learning to call Marcus Truckman and reaching for him when he walked through the door. It was his daughter Juniper meeting Vivian for the first time and declaring her really good at being a mom, like it was the highest compliment she could imagine. It was sitting on the same park bench one Saturday afternoon while their kids played together. Juniper pushing Beckett on the baby swing while he shrieked with delight. It was walking back to the parking lot with Junie holding Vivian's hand on one side and Marcus's on the other, chattering about school and purple dragons and whether butterflies remembered being caterpillars. It felt like a family. The thought terrified Marcus and thrilled him and made him wonder if maybe after 3 years in the dark, he was finally ready to step back into the light. He did not see the storm coming. The phone call came on a Sunday evening. Franklin Ashford's voice was cold enough to freeze the blood in Marcus's veins. "We need to talk about this woman." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What woman?" "Don't play games with us," Monica told Tom. "Tom told us. You're seeing someone. Someone with a child. Someone you gave money to and then gave a job." Franklin's voice hardened. "We drove by your office yesterday. We saw her car. We saw her carrying a child inside. And today we heard you took her and her son to the park with Juniper. Like you're already playing family. It's not like that." Meredith's voice cut in, trembling with tears and fury. "It's only been 3 years, Marcus. 3 years since our daughter died. And you're already replacing her. Playing house with some stranger. I'm not replacing anyone." "We've spoken to an attorney." Franklin's voice had gone formal, cold. "We're concerned about Juniper's well-being. Perhaps she should spend more time with us while you sort yourself out." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're threatening to take my daughter? We're protecting our granddaughter from you making the same mistake twice." And then came the blow that nearly destroyed him. Juniper appeared in his doorway, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. "Daddy, Grandma called me yesterday when you were outside. She asked if Vivian was trying to be my new mommy. She asked if I still loved mommy." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What did you tell her, baby?" Juniper's voice was small and scared. "I told her I still love mommy. And I told her Vivian isn't trying to be my mommy. She's just nice. And she makes you happy. And I thought that was okay." The little girl started crying. "Did I say something wrong? Is it my fault?" Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight while his world crumbled around him. He called Vivian that night and told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, he thought she had hung up. Then her voice came, barely a whisper. "I should quit, distance myself, if I'm the reason you might lose Uni. This is not your fault. I can't let another child lose a parent because of me." The line went dead. The next morning, Marcus drove to Vivian's apartment. The door was unlocked. The rooms were empty. An elderly neighbor told him she had left before dawn. Suitcases, a crying baby, a car packed with everything she owned. She was gone. His phone buzzed with a text message. "I'm sorry. You and Uni deserve better than the mess I bring. Thank you for everything. Take care of yourself." V, he tried calling. The phone went straight to voicemail. He texted back, begging her to answer, to let him explain, to give them a chance to figure this out together. Nothing. Vivian Caldwell had vanished. And she had taken a piece of Marcus's heart with her, but that was not the worst of it. 3 days later, Rosalind called with news that made Marcus's blood run cold. Damian Vance showed up at her apartment the day before she left. Beckett's father. He's threatening to sue for custody, claiming she's an unfit mother. She's not running from your in-laws, Marcus. She's running from him, too. She thinks if she disappears, everyone will leave her alone. Marcus sat in his empty office, surrounded by the organizational system Vivian had created, staring at the toy truck Beckett had left behind. Juniper found him there that evening. She climbed into his lap and looked at him with those eyes that were too wise for 7 years old. Daddy, Mrs. Bellamy says our hearts can hold lots of love at the same time. Love doesn't have limits. It just grows. She paused. So if you love Vivian, that's okay. It doesn't mean you love Mommy less. And if Vivian is scared, maybe she just needs someone to tell her she's worth fighting for. Marcus looked at his daughter. When did you get so wise? Juniper smiled. Just a little. I've always been wise, Daddy. You're just slow at noticing. Marcus made his decision that night. He was going to find her. He was going to fight for her. But first, he had someone else to confront. Marcus stood in his in-laws' living room, and for the first time since Elaine's death, he did not back down. You called my daughter behind my back. You made her feel like loving someone new meant betraying her mother. You threatened to take her from me. Meredith was crying. Franklin stood rigid, arms crossed. We were trying to protect her. No. You were trying to protect yourselves from moving on, from accepting that Elaine is gone and life continues. How dare you? I loved your daughter. I will always love your daughter. But she's been gone for 3 years, and I can't stop living just because you can't stop grieving. Marcus's voice broke, but he kept going. Elaine would want Uni to have a full life, a happy father, maybe even a mother figure someday. She would never want Uni to grow up watching me be alone and miserable just to prove I still love her. The silence that followed was deafening. Meredith's sobs had quieted. Franklin's rigid posture had softened, just slightly. I'm not asking you to love Vivian. I'm asking you to let me try to be happy again, and to never use Juniper as a weapon between us. He stood up. I'm going to Galveston to bring her back. When I do, I hope you'll give her a chance. But even if you don't, I'm done letting fear control my life. He left them standing in their living room and drove through the night. 4 hours to Galveston. 4 hours of highway and darkness, and hoping he was not too late. Vivian's mother, Coraline, lived in a small house in a working-class neighborhood. The kind of place where people kept their yards neat despite having limited resources. AA medallions on the shelf, 3 years sober, fighting her own battles. She met Marcus at the door with sharp eyes and crossed arms. You the one she's been crying about? Yes, ma'am. You also the one who stood up for her in that restaurant? Yes, ma'am. Coraline studied him for a long moment, then she stepped aside. She's in the backyard, but I'm warning you, that Damien showed up yesterday, threatened her again. She's scared out of her mind. Marcus found Vivian sitting on an old porch swing, Beckett playing at her feet. When she saw him, her face went through shock, hope, fear, and finally something like surrender. What are you doing here? Giving you something to think about. He sat down beside her. I talked to my in-laws. They're backing off. And Damien, he pulled out his phone. Rosa did some digging. Turns out Damien Vance has 2 other women claiming he's the father of their children. He's got a warrant out in Oklahoma for unpaid child support. He's been in and out of jobs for 3 years. No judge would give him custody. He was bluffing, using fear to control you. Vivian's hands were shaking. He said he'd take Beck. He can't, and he won't, because you're not alone anymore. Marcus took her hand. You don't have to run, not from him. Not from my in-laws, not from me. What if I'm not enough? What if you realize I'm just a mess and you made a mistake? What if you are enough? What if this works? Marcus lifted her hand to his lips. I'm falling in love with you. Not because I want to rescue you, because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because you make me want to be alive again. Because when Juniper talks about you, her whole face lights up. I'm scared, so am I. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Vivian looked at her son, then at Marcus, then at the sky turning gold with sunset. Okay, she whispered the word like a vow. Okay, I'll come back. 1 week later, Vivian was back in Austin when the video went viral. Someone at the Sterling Oak had posted the footage from that night. Marcus standing up, declaring this stranger was his date, walking out with her while the whole restaurant watched in stunned silence. 2.3 million views. Hashtag Justice for Vivian trending nationally. The restaurant was flooded with one-star reviews. Customers canceled reservations. The story made local news, then national. And then came the press conference. Marcus and Vivian sat on her couch with Juniper and Beckett, watching the owner of the Sterling Oak step up to a podium surrounded by reporters. After reviewing the incident and the public response, we have made the decision to terminate Gerard Whitmore's employment, effective immediately. His actions do not represent our values. The camera panned to Gerard standing in the corner, face white, being escorted out by security, past the reporters, past the cameras, into disgrace. Vivian's hand found Marcus's. He's gone. He actually got fired. Sometimes the world gets it right. Juniper looked up from the screen. That's what happens to mean people, right, Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. Eventually it does. The months that followed were not easy. There were awkward dinners with Meredith and Franklin. There were moments when Vivian's old fears surfaced and she pulled back, convinced it was all about to fall apart. There were late nights with sick children and overwhelming work and learning how to fight fair and forgive. But there were good moments too. Vivian finishing her teaching degree, walking across the stage while Marcus and both children cheered. Juniper teaching Beckett how to color, declaring him her brother, even though the paperwork had not caught up yet. Franklin holding Beckett for the first time when the toddler ran to him shouting, "Grandpa Truck," and the old man's eyes filling with tears he did not try to hide. Meredith taking Vivian's hand at dinner and saying, "I think Elaine would have liked you." She always rooted for the underdog. Small moments, adding up to a life. 8 months after Vivian returned to Austin, she showed up on Marcus's porch after the children were asleep. I'm ready to stop being scared, ready to choose this, choose us. Her eyes were fierce and certain. I love you, Marcus Thornton. I love Juniper and your patience and the way you stood up for me when no one else did. I love that you never made me feel like a charity case. Marcus pulled her close. I love you too. Have loved you since you apologized for bringing your baby to that restaurant and looked at me like you were bracing for the world to end. It did end, Vivian whispered against his chest. The old world. And you helped me build a new one. He kissed her then, on the porch, under the stars, while the house behind them held the sleeping children who would wake up tomorrow to a family being made whole. The Starlight Diner looked exactly the same. Neon signs buzzing, coffee cups that never went empty, waitresses who called everyone honey. Marcus and Vivian sat in the same corner booth where they had shared their first meal. But everything else had changed. Juniper, now 8, was teaching Beckett how to use crayons without eating them. The 2.5-year-old was not entirely convinced this was better than tasting them, but he was trying. Vivian looked down at her hand, at the ring that had not been there a year ago. You know what I was thinking when we sat here the first time? That you were crazy for helping a stranger? No, I was thinking maybe there's a reason I came to that restaurant tonight. Maybe there's a reason you forgot about the date. Maybe we were supposed to find each other. Juniper did not look up from her coloring. Duh, Daddy. That's obvious. Mommy in heaven sent her to us. The table went still. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. You think so? Juniper looked up then, her expression serious and certain. I know so. Mommy always said she wanted me to be happy, and you make Daddy happy, so she definitely sent you. Marcus reached across the table and took his daughter's hand, then his wife's. The four of them sat there in the neon glow, connected. Through the window, the same sign that had flickered a year ago still buzzed its welcome to everyone who walked through the door. The same scratched tables held the same bottomless coffee cups. The same warmth wrapped around anyone who needed it. But for the family in the corner booth, everything was different. Thank you. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion. For standing up for me, for seeing me when no one else did, for not giving up. Marcus smiled. Thank you for being brave enough to come back. Outside, Austin went about its evening business. Cars passed, people walked, the world kept turning. Inside, a family that had been built from broken pieces sat together, whole. 1 year ago, Vivian Caldwell had walked into a restaurant with a baby on her hip and apologized for existing. She had been fired for being a mother, humiliated for being human, left with nothing but $73 and a child who needed her to be strong. Tonight, she sat in a diner with a husband who had stood up for her when no one else would. A stepdaughter who believed her mother in heaven had sent her to them. A son who was trying very hard to color inside the lines. She did not apologize anymore. Not for being a mother, not for needing help, not for being human. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was home,